Okay, so I'm back from my South American trip on the AJP PR7. Right at the very start I said it's the chosen bike. Having done this trip and come back, would I still say the same thing? Is it the chosen bike? Is it the perfect bike? Well, we know there's no such thing as a perfect bike. I've been riding bikes since I was 14, and I was having a look last night just for a bit of fun. I reckon I've had 11 English bikes, 5 Italian bikes, 3 East German bikes, 1 Russian bike, and I've lost count of how many Japanese bikes I've ridden or owned over the years. So I do know there's no such thing as the perfect bike. All there is the perfect compromise. So what's the perfect compromise? Well, it depends what kind of motorcycling you're going to do. Are you going to ride on your own, in which case you probably do want something fairly light? Are you riding solo? Are you riding with a passenger? All these things make up the kind of bike that you choose when you go on a trip. Personally, I tend to prefer going solo, and I don't usually ride with a passenger. I tend to like to ride places where there's quite a bit of off-road motorcycling. Some of that might be quite technical stuff. Some of it will just be dirt tracks, gravel tracks, in which case most bikes will do a gravel road without much trouble. But if you want to do some technical stuff and you're on your own and the terrain gets tricky, you really don't want a heavy bike unless you're very experienced and you are within distance of someone helping you out if you get stuck. I tend to be in none of those areas. I always tend to be out of the way places, and if I am on my own, I want to be able to pick up a bike. I want to be able to look after that bike, and I want to make sure that bike's going to look after me. So that goes some way to answering the question. So let me just run through some technical stuff. Here's a sheet which gives the technical data of the bike that might be of interest for you. Okay, so there you have the technical data. You know you've got a lovely 17-litre fuel tank that sits right down here. You've got 3 litres in reserve. How did that play out? Well, we reckon we were getting 230 miles pretty frequently before we hit the fuel reserve, which meant we could manage 250, 280 miles without absolute panic. And I have to admit that there were situations where we were right on that level. So that's quite useful. You know that you can go a fair old way on a tank of fuel. That's important. The fact that it sits down here is really good if you're off-road. The weight is sitting down low. All these factors make it a good feature. The sat nav and all the mapping we ran from the Samsung Galaxy that sits up front here, that works seamlessly. We had no problems with that. Maybe a few issues with some of the software we were using, but that was nothing to do with the hardware that we were using. In terms of handling, brilliant. I mean, I can't fault it. We did some technical riding, and I wouldn't have wanted to be on anything bigger, I can assure you, on some of those bits. The only time, hand on heart, I can say I wish I'd been on a bigger bike were some of those days where we had long roads of, oh God, 300 miles, 200 miles, 250 miles in a straight line. All right, generally, but when you've got a strong side wind as well, actually a big GS would be great. But you know, that's like 4 days of a 6-week trip. It's nothing. For the rest of the time, you're on an agile bike, you're doing dirt roads, you're doing A and B roads, you're doing dirty, wet, muddy roads. This bike is just ideal for those scenarios. It's light, it's flickable. We actually had one day when one of the guys was off sick, and Richard and I decided we were just going to have a bit of fun that day. We took the bikes out and we did 200 miles of pretty full-on mountain racing. Scrubbed out the front brakes completely. We wore those out in 200 miles. But what a bike. It just performed so well on those little A and B roads. and yet you take it out in the dirt, it performs equally well. There's a few situations where I definitely messed up on positioning and getting into some positions and tracks that I probably shouldn't have done, but the bike just sorted it out for me. It's way above my capability, I have to say. It's got enough grunt, 600cc, it's got enough poke, and the torque of the engine sits low. So when you're in those wet, muddy conditions where you want some good traction and low down momentum, the throttle response is lovely, and it just pulls you through the dirt or the sand without having to have that engine revving. It's really lovely. So I have to say, fuel economy is really good, handling is excellent. Would I say this is the chosen bike for a journey like that? Absolutely yes. Would I take it again? Absolutely yes. I've ridden bikes. I rode a PC Honda 50 from Oxford to Scotland in 1978. I rode a Honda 904 down to South Italy in 1982. I rode a Tenere, an old one, 1980s, up to North Cap in 95. None of those bikes really fitted the bill for everything. The 900 was great on big flat roads hurtling down the motorways, but you couldn't do much else with it. Whereas a bike like this, A and B roads, a little bit of motorway, it'll sit at 80 miles an hour all day, but you know, it's a light bike, so if you've got heavy winds and heavy draft off traffic, it's not going to sit as comfortable as a big bike. But how much of that are you likely to be doing? If the answer is not a lot, then a 600cc single cylinder gives you all the fun you want on an A and B road, but you can just turn off down a green lane, turn off through a gate, go off track, go and do the dirt, it'll handle it, come back on the road, don't have to think about it, it does it all. So yeah, I'm really pleased, can't recommend it enough. Lovely bike. Thanks for following, and hopefully have some updates for you soon. Okay, just to add a few notes to the end of that last section, since we've come back and spoken to AJP, we've been notified that the 2019 version, which is this bike, has had a few updates for the 2020 version. Mainly improvements to the brakes. They've added Brembo brakes, which will give better life. That'd be great for doing some mountain racing. They've also changed some of the materials on the back axle to improve the quality of that. I think there've been a few issues with that. That's all changed now, and they've added a new fuel pump, new improved fuel pump. There's been a few little adjustments, I gather, on the geometry of the bike. I haven't ridden it yet. I'm hoping to have a ride soon. I'm not sure that I'm going to notice those changes, but I'm told they just improved the steering a little bit. But I hope that's useful as an update. As I say, I'm hoping to have a go on the 2020 version in the next month. I'll let you know how I get on with that one. Okay, bye.